So Congresswoman Jane Harman is one of the most outstanding public servants in this country. There's no question about it.
I knew I came up here for a reason. Is that all you're going to say?
No, I'm going to say just two more sentences because I want to make sure you have most of the time. Her leadership while on the Hill, her expertise having to do with some of the hardest issues in this country, dealing with counterterrorism, dealing with armed services, and her pioneering approach to leadership, whether it's actually being a strong woman who supports strong women, or other kinds of issues. I just have to say, we are unbelievably lucky that she is here. She is here this year. We are so honored in the role of the Klinsky Professor, which is an opportunity that we have because of the generosity of an alum, Steve and Maureen Klinsky, to bring to campus people who have done things that don't look like the typical law career. So we're going to spend some of our time today talking about your amazing career. Right now, as the head of the Wilson Center, which is a bipartisan policy think tank, she is still deeply involved in the most pressing issues with the commitment to come up with concrete, doable solutions. So we will get to all of that, but first we're going to ask your view about last night's election.
Where's the scotch? First of all, do all of you know how lucky you are to have Martha as the dean here? Raise your hand if you love Martha.
Oh, no.
Oh, raise your hand if you don't love Martha. No. Okay, so last night was bad. It's not because, although I am a Democrat, it's not because I think only Democrats can win, but it is because I think that a few people who were really good problem solvers, there aren't many in Congress, got knocked off. And the fewer problem solvers there are, the more dysfunctional, if that's possible, the place gets. And I'm very depressed about this election. I think people were dissatisfied with Obama. We can go into that. I know he's an HLS grad, as I am, and as you all will be. But I think there are things he has and has not done that are making people frustrated. I know they were dissatisfied with the economy. That's really not his fault, but the income gap is making it so most people don't feel that even though the economy's recovering, that they're recovering. But I also think this was just a protest vote. And anyone who was anywhere near Washington, although, yes, some Washington insiders won, but a lot of people who weren't near Washington won as a protest vote. And how this all sorts out, we'll see. But
does it hurt to actually be bipartisan right now in politics?
It's hurt for a long time. There is no political value in being bipartisan. There is a value. I mean, putting the country first, I happen to think, is a very good thing to do. But if you look at the primary system in most states, you get punished for being bipartisan. And I'll hold up as my poster person a guy named Dick Lugar from Indiana, who was in the Senate for 40 years, a Republican, who made deals all the time, put the country first, very, very informed on foreign policy, lovely man who got knocked off in the primary in this election cycle by an absolute nobody with no credentials. And then, of course, the Democrat won. I mean, so I guess it was the last election cycle. So who wins in that case? And I think that people, I have my own battle scars for being bipartisan. But I think the way Congress works is if people are ready to do deals. The way the presidency works is if the president's ready to do deals with the Congress. And we have come up short on both counts.
Well, I guess I have to take you up on the suggestion of saying something about President Obama.
Oh, me? Well, you can too. You all can. I think he's an extremely bright man. I have to confess I was a Hillary delegate in the last cycle, and I was still then a member of Congress. But when she lost, she ran a terrible campaign. I think most people would agree. When she lost, I endorsed him, and I was a surrogate for him during the general election cycle, and I had enormously high hopes. I mean, I didn't support her because I didn't like him. I supported her because she was a very old and dear friend of mine and had personally asked for my support, and I personally wanted to support a strong and qualified woman also. That wasn't the only reason I supported her. But when she lost the primary, I supported him enthusiastically. And I think he's done some things very well, but his problem is he had virtually no experience running anything. And this is a big enterprise. And assembling a team that can run things and then having the right instincts, it seems to me, to engage with other people and, as I said, do deals are essential parts of it, regardless of how smart you are. And he's surely smart enough and for this. And he's tried some courageous things, and a few have worked very well. On the one hand, I voted for health care reform, and I'm proud that he did it. The bill was hardly perfect, but he got the bill he could get. I'm also proud that he announced that he was going to close Guantanamo Bay Prison. Unfortunately, it's not closed. I'm looking at my friend Phil, and I think that's a tragedy.
Is partly to blame for that.
Congress, yes, but Congress boxed him in. Yeah. If he had set that up in a smarter way, he might have gotten there by now, and it's really sad. So, he's not blameless with that. Right. I think the takedown of Osama bin Laden also was done brilliantly, and he put his career on the line to do that. That could have been botched. So those are a few things, both good and bad.
Tell us about how you got into politics. Was it something you thought about when you were in law school or even before? How did this happen? And how did you develop the extraordinary expertise that you did on these very tough national security issues?
I talked to Phil Hyman. He knows everything. So my story is, some of you may have a story like this, except it would apply to your great-grandparents. In my case, I grew up in Los Angeles, daughter of immigrants, both parents first in their families to go to college. And I went to public school in Los Angeles. And in 1960, before most of your grandparents were born, but that was Phil's graduating year from Harvard Law School. Ha! Is that right? Yeah. In 1960, I went to the Democratic Convention in Los Angeles as a high school kid. And I was there when John Kennedy was nominated for president. And I literally met Eleanor Roosevelt and a number of other important players. And on the spot, I just knew this is my career. This is what I'm doing. I didn't get there in 5 minutes, but I was there when Kennedy gave his acceptance speech at the LA Coliseum, which is the place where USC plays, the Trojans play football. It's still there. It's a very old, sort of wonderful landmark. But at any rate, I ran my high school Young Democratic Club. I went to Smith College, which back in the day was mostly Republican, but I ran the Democrats at Smith, got involved in Massachusetts politics. I came here right after college. By the way, at Smith, I decided I wanted to go to law school. And went to take the law boards. Have you heard this story? Smith didn't offer the law boards because girls didn't go to law school. And so I had to go to Amherst, then all boys or males, and take the law boards there. So I came here, and among other things, I was a research assistant for Abe Shays. Most of you have seen his glorious picture on the wall. He was a fabulous guy who had been the legal advisor at the State Department. And he was very involved in the Bobby Kennedy campaign. So then I got to that. And then I graduated and moved to Washington. Of course I did. And this was 1969. Richard Nixon was president. Just picture this, guys. And so I actually then married someone I had met who went here, whom I'd met in a job interview that Abe Shays made me go to. Don't ask. It was Vietnam. I didn't go to my own graduation. People were in a different place mentally. And I left the country. What else would you do? Richard Nixon was president. Came back, and then I got involved. First I practiced law briefly, but had two classmates who were working for a California senator named John Tunney, son of Gene Tunney, the famous fighter. And I, against the advice of everyone in my law firm, took a leave of absence for a year and went to work for Tunney as a legislative assistant. Of course, I stayed 5. I became his chief LA, and then I became chief counsel of each of 2 subcommittees that he chaired, the second of which was the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights. And that was a big deal back in the day. Sam Ervin, whom you've probably never heard of, who ran the Watergate Committee in the Senate, had retired, and Tunney got the slot. And it was just an extraordinary ride. And from there to the Carter White House, and then, in case anybody missed it, Carter lost, and Ted Kennedy challenged Carter, and both lost to Ronald Reagan in 1980. So I was in the wilderness for 12 years practicing law, which wasn't my favorite occupation, volunteering for every political activity. And then in 1992, when I was mother of 4, leading a kind of bi-coastal life, a classmate of mine from here, Mel Levine, who was a member of Congress from West Los Angeles, where I grew up, decided to run for the Senate and gave up his seat. And so it was clear that there'd be an open seat there, or not clear that there would be, possibly. Reapportionment, as you know, is every 10 years. It's the second 2 years into each decade. So there was going to be reapportionment in 1992. And Mel called to say he wasn't running for a seat. It wasn't sure there'd be a seat, but just the whole thing. The Harman family moved full-time to Los Angeles. This was a project, guys. My older kids were one in college here and one on a school year abroad program, but I had little kids, moved to LA full-time, became an LA resident again, which I'd given up, don't ask, to become a Washington, D.C. resident. Why? And so ran for Congress in an open seat that was a lean Republican seat and won. And that's how it happened.
Was it hard each time to run?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's not each time. You just keep running. It's the perpetual campaign. You have no idea, this business of raising money, maybe you do. How many of you have worked for members of in congressional campaigns? Okay. How many of you have raised money for members of Congress? 1, 2, Phil? Oh, who knew? But it's grueling.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Dialing for dollars.
And you just keep doing it. And these races cost an absolute fortune. And so somebody asked me once, I had, the little Congress pins. Somebody was looking at it and said, well, where do you get those? Where'd you get that? And I said, oh, it costs, $2 million plus every 2 years. You can have one too. But it just never ends.
And over the course of your service, it became worse.
Yeah, it became, the campaign piece became much worse. So I was elected in 1992, the so-called Year of the Woman. That is because the number of women in the House doubled from about 13 or 14 to 25 or 6. Guess what? As of last night, and I haven't looked at what the split is, there are 100 women in the House. That maybe is a bright light. Just maybe that will make some difference.
Is great. That is great.
But at any rate, back in the day, there were 25 or so women. And that was the year that 2 women were elected from California, Boxer and Feinstein, who are still there. So the Year of the Woman lasted a year. In '94, Newt Gingrich came to power, and most of the women elected, as I was, in open seats lost in '94. You're most vulnerable in your first reelect. And in my case, on election night, I was down about 250 votes, but there were 10,000 uncounted absentee votes. So I knew, and this was a lean Republican seat. I can explain how I won in a lean Republican seat, but I knew this was going to be a bear, and then I would need a very good lawyer to help me. So I called one, and I'm sorry, he went to Yale Law School, but
it's okay.
I knew him well. His name is David Boies. Good choice, right, guys? Everybody know who he is. He litigated the Prop 8 case, and I said, well, David, I think, every ballot is going to matter, and I'm sure there's going to be a challenge, and et cetera. And he said, I'll be out. He had grown up in California. How about if I come out for 2 weeks pro bono? So he did. And at the end of 2 weeks, I won by 811 votes out of 225,000 votes cast. And then my opponent who had declared victory and flown back to Washington on the day after the election, and was running for class president in the Newt Gingrich class, challenged my race under something called the Federal Contest of Elections Act, which is a statute that's used to, it's actually a form of torture. And it was a 9-month challenge. It was horrible. And finally, I had already been certified as the winner, but finally she went away.
Wow. So how did you win in a lean Republican district?
Funny you should ask. Okay, so open seats are when there's no incumbent, which are they're easier to win than if there's, well, it depends what the incumbent's like, but in many cases the incumbent is better known and on committees and can argue she is, crucially important and needs to stay there and whatever. But open seat, in this case, it was the aerospace, it still is, Aerospace Center of California. I don't know how many of you are lucky enough to be from California? Oh, perfect. How many of you from the Los Angeles area? Well, that's not enough. But so this district, which actually technically was not where I grew up next to UCLA in West LA. But this was along the coast, the California coast, just south of Santa Monica. And it's where the whole aerospace industry is in California and where our intelligence satellites are made, almost all of them. Huge aerospace base. And there's something called the LA Air Force Base, which doesn't look like an Air Force base. It doesn't have runways. It's the procurement arm for missiles and satellites. And it is the economic engine for this area. So if you don't know anything about aerospace, what are you doing there? So at any rate, I knew something about aerospace. I had been I left that out of my little resume, special counsel to the Defense Department for a couple of years, also back along the way. And so 5 Democrats were running and 7 Republicans were running in this lean Republican seat. And of the 5 Democrats, I was the only one who had any experience with defense and aerospace issues. So that wasn't hard. In the winner of the Republican primary, 7 people, was a woman who had been on the LA City Council and was very well known, but 1, she didn't know much about aerospace, and 2, she was anti-choice. And that was the year, just strange to remember, not most of you weren't born, but it was the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings. You've probably heard about this. And choice was a motivating issue. And one of the other people in the Republican primary, who fortunately lost, was Maureen Reagan, daughter of Ronald Reagan. And she sadly died of cancer a few years ago. Very nice woman who was a pro-choice Republican. There used to be people who were pro-choice Republicans. And if she had won the primary, she would have beat me, even though I knew more about aerospace. So I won with this coalition of pro-choice Republican women who became Republicans for Harman, and I kept them all the years, and aerospace executives, all of whom supported me because nobody else knew nothing about aerospace.
So let's turn to defense and national security. The country obviously has been through some real challenges. Certainly 9/11 is simply one of those challenges. Yeah. ISIS, you and I have talked about before, but could you first of all help everybody understand what is the role that the experts in Congress play in foreign policy, and what are the top 3 issues that face us right now?
Well, there's no rule book really for how this is all supposed to work, and one of the fun things I'm doing in this seminar that you asked me to teach, that I'm having a ball teaching,
so grateful,
is talking tomorrow about authorization for war. And a guy named Jeff Smith, who used to be general counsel of the CIA and has thought deeply about this, is going to be Skyped in. And by the way, at the Wilson Center in about 3 weeks, we're having in fact, the day Congress comes back, Congress is coming back on, it's like Halloween, on November 12th. So that's next week.
Next week.
We're doing a panel on this. And Tim Kaine, who's a member of the Senate from Virginia, who's very outspoken, and somebody named Jack Goldsmith. Anybody heard of Jack Goldsmith? And a couple others are going to be on this panel talking about this. But it's not clear-cut what Congress's role is in foreign policy. I mean, Congress provides the money to make the government run and supposedly oversees how the money is spent. So some of that money goes for foreign policy, so Congress has an oversight role. But for a lot of reasons, the committee system was designed in the 19th century, so jurisdictions are confused. Some people in Congress really care about foreign policy, a lot don't. Voters don't. I mean, the polling always shows that 3%, single digits of people care. And so people campaign on other issues and are better informed in most cases on other issues. So what should Congress's role in foreign policy be? I think it should be robust. It's an independent branch of government. It has the constitutional obligation to declare war. Again, what is war? And it has this oversight responsibility to be sure that funds are well spent. And I think Congress it's been the incredible shrinking Congress for every reason in the last decade, but especially on these issues. It's just totally AWOL. And I've been very upset about it. And so have some members in Congress been upset about it. And a little dance is going on now where a number of members of Congress think, and I strongly agree, that the authorizations to use military force that Congress passed after 9/11 do not apply to what we are doing in the Middle East, and that we need a new AUMF, and maybe one that's much more circumscribed and that will sunset, expire in a finite period of time, et cetera, et cetera. Some of these members in both parties have introduced some draft bills, including Tim Kaine. But at any rate, the dance that's going on is the president hasn't asked us to do this. He's only said he welcomes Congress doing this. My view is, forget about it. You're Congress. This is your obligation. Just do it. The president's not going to tell you not to do it, and I don't know why he hasn't asked, and I wish he would, and that is actually something I said to him personally recently when I was invited to a small dinner with him in the White House. But Congress should just do the responsible thing. And I don't think this issue is partisan. I mean, the bad guys aren't going to check our party registration before they blow us up. So we ought to think this through and come up with a responsible strategy to protect the country, and that is Congress's constitutional obligation.
So how big a threat is ISIS, and how big a threat is Snowden, and how big a threat really are the threats that we don't know, the unknowns?
The unknown unknowns. You're quoting Don Rumsfeld.
I am.
Does everybody know? Everybody remember him? The unknown unknowns? Yeah. How big a threat is ISIS? We don't know yet. And it's not the only threat. How big a threat is terrorism and a bunch of groups that are loosely affiliated around the world? It's a big threat. And the biggest threat part of it is that a lot of people in this country are self-radicalizing by going on the internet and learning how to make pressure cooker bombs. Think the Boston Marathon. I know one of those guys went back to Russia. But they're self-radicalizing. They are persuaded by a social media campaign that is very effective, that is amplified by our media, which plays a lot of this stuff. Fortunately, not beheadings, but it plays a lot of these arguments. And we, the strongest and most robust democracy and economy in history, don't have a good counter-argument, which is pathetic. And so they have a kind of open field to put their arguments out. They're also, in some cases, reasonably skilled. I mean, some of these disaffected Baathists in Iraq are good generals trained by Saddam Hussein himself. And they have never been included in the government that stood up after we deposed him. And they're disaffected, and so they're joining the bad guys because there's not a good alternative there. So, I mean, what am I saying with ISIL? We can't defeat threats like that just kinetically. We can't use drones only and knock off people. We have to win the argument, and we're doing a bad job so far of winning the argument. So that's kind of my ISIL comment.
Hearts and minds.
Yeah, and now Snowden. I have nothing good to say about, I have one good thing to say about Snowden. The one good thing I have to say about Snowden is that he has, what he did has generated a big conversation about intelligence and surveillance. And we should have had that conversation way before Snowden when these policies were enacted. One of the reasons we didn't have the conversation is that the Bush administration, Bush 43 administration, used the executive authority of the president, Article 2 commander-in-chief authorities, to put in place most of these programs and cut out Congress. Now, why does that matter? Well, when Congress is in the game, especially if Congress has to legislate, hearings are held and there's a public conversation and there's a chance for people to get a clue. Congress did get in the game late. In 2008, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act was amended to cover the programs that are now are under further discussion. So there was a debate, but not everyone was clued in. Now everyone's clued in. I think that outcome is good. I think what Snowden did was disgraceful, and I don't think he's a whistleblower. If he were a whistleblower, he could come back to this country and stand trial. I think there's a lot of sympathy for him here. I think he would get a fair trial. But he's not doing that. To remind, he left from Honolulu to go to China, and then he left from China to go to Russia, and I don't think either of those governments is really the kind of open government consistent with the beliefs that he says he has. And he not only took information about these programs that are now in the news, but he took our technology playbook, which now that it's out there, is in the hands of bad guys. And I have no sympathy for that.
Makes us more vulnerable.
Yeah.
I'm going to open up for questions and comments in a few minutes, but I have two more that I want to ask. You are, as I said before, a strong woman who supports strong women. That's not always the case. Do you care to comment?
Sort of. So Madeleine Albright, whom I love, has this marvelous line that there's a cold place in hell for women who don't help women. And a lot of women should be in hell because, in case you missed it, some men don't support women or men either, but a lot of women make it, or certainly back in my generation, and then roll up the stepladder, and because they're insecure and they don't want other women to make it. It's just unacceptable. And I have really tried hard over a long career so far to help other women and to hire women and to make sure that I'm surrounded by the smartest people. How am I going to be smart if they're not smarter? And I'm not threatened by that. I don't know why I would be threatened by that, but unfortunately that is not always true of women. And glad you mentioned that because it's a moral obligation. I'm looking at all of you. Mm-hmm. Is anybody going to disappoint me? Hey. Raise your hand if you're going to hell. Okay.
Well, thank you for your leadership and your role model activity in that regard in particular. And the last question I have, and then I come to the mics if you have a question that you'd like to ask. Should people go into elected office right now?
Yes.
Why should they?
Well, I left. I mean, you didn't ask me about that, Martha.
Well,
so
I'm
in my, I've just been reelected by a large margin to my 9th term in 2010 when a huge number of people lost.
Yes.
And a huge number of Democrats lost. Big wipeout year, just not quite as bad as this one, but up there. But after a primary from hell, a very far left candidate called me a traitor and a spy and said I should be in jail, which may be true, but anyway. And the general election from hell, Tea Party candidate, I was a traitor and a spy and I should be in jail. And then I win, and Congress is in the lame duck session, it's so well named, where it's attempting to do the work it has not done at all in 2 years. And it's Christmas time, it's like December 20th, and the headhunters for the Wilson Center call. And they had, Lee Hamilton held the job I now have for 12 years. He left Congress. I think most of you probably know who he is. He was enormously impressive, still is, man from Indiana who chaired the House Foreign Affairs Committee and was co-chair of the 9/11 Commission, and just scrupulously bipartisan, probative, fair, impressive. Anyway, he left in the mid-90s. And he retired, announced he was retiring in 2010, and I learned later, a number of extraordinary people were interviewed to succeed him, and why none of them was chosen, I have no idea. But so the search reopened. I get this phone call from the headhunter firm while I'm in Congress in this lame duck session in which nothing's happening, perfect timing. Would you be interested in applying? And I went home and asked my late husband, Sidney Harman, well, what do you think? Do it. Get out of there. You work in a pit. It was hilarious. And I said, well, honey, I haven't even been interviewed. Oh, you'll get the job. Do it. Anyway, so I got the job. And I decided after some soul searching, because, people had just put themselves out big time to help elect me, that I should do it. And because the opportunity to be in the living memorial to our only PhD president, Woodrow Wilson, which is a huge think tank in downtown Washington.
Chartered by Congress.
Chartered by Congress, a presidentially appointed board, has existed for 40 years, 150 world-class scholars a year, 10 geographic programs, it's intellectual candy store, fabulous. Maybe only second to this place, which I truly love. It was just enormous. And so, I walk out and the place goes to hell. I did it. No, I didn't do it. But there isn't a person up there who doesn't think my timing was impeccable. Mm-hmm. And it really has gotten seriously worse since 2011. Why should people run now? How is this place going to change unless people who seriously want to solve problems join it? It's a hard thing to do because the process favors folks who don't seriously want to solve problems. In most states set the time and manner of elections. So the primary system varies by state. And California, of course, has done the right thing by establishing citizen commissions to draw the congressional lines, and also a jungle primary where everybody runs against everybody. These things promote the campaigns and election of sensible people in both parties. And most states don't do that. So most states have a very partisan primary process where to get elected in either party, you have to toe the line with a very committed single-issue group of voters. That's not a good recipe for doing deals. And so most states are like that, and if you run in a state like that, it's very hard. Also, with unlimited money in campaigns, I'm rabid about how wrong-headed I think are the recent Supreme Court decisions, but with unlimited money in campaigns, it's very hard for people. So get in the game and change the game, it would be my advice.
Great. Okay, so come ask questions. I'll keep asking, but here's another one. You've recently joined the Commission on Presidential Debates.
Do you know who's on that or was on that? Has anyone ever heard of Newt Minow?
So my dad was on that, but
he's one of the youngest people on the planet. He's what, 89?
89, yeah.
He's only 89.
Right.
Yeah.
But what is the value of debates? What role do debates play, whether in the presidential elections or other elections?
Well, I continue to think that there is a room for civil discourse, and that what people's opinions are matter, and that presidential debates, far more than ads, which are sadly often attack ads, are a useful way for people to learn about who the candidates are. And it really matters who the president is. So if the Presidential Debate Commission sets up the debate system wisely, and there always are issues about third parties and locations of these debates and rules for the debates, I think that helps people. First of all, it encourages candidates to be better, and hopefully it gets voters exposed to which candidates they think are better. So as a good government tool, I think this is it. I also was flattered that 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans were asked to join. The Republicans were Mitch Daniels, who is a very capable former governor of Indiana, who's now the president of Purdue. And Olympia Snowe, who I gather was around here last week. And the Democrats were Leon Panetta, anyone ever heard of him, and Jane. So I thought that was cool.
Pretty darn good.
So I did it.
Please come and say who you are.
Hi, my name is Chris Mirasola. I'm a 1L. I was wondering, as a head of a think tank, and we've heard a lot about think tanks in the news recently, I was wondering what you think the role of a think tank is in D.C. now.
Well, there are different kinds of think tanks in D.C. There are some on the far left and some on the far right. The Wilson Center tries to stay right in the middle. And I think that is a huge market opportunity because Congress is so polarized. We have convening space where we can discuss things like authorization for war in a balanced way and get enormous attention. We also cannot lobby. That's not part of our mandate, but we can frame issues and suggest some actionable ideas for policymakers. And there isn't much competition in Washington for what we do.
Hi, thank you for coming to speak with us today. My name is Lawrence Lusky. I'm a 1L. I really think it's lucky that we have you here the morning after a major election, especially with the results that we've had.
I'd rather be here than in Washington, D.C. this morning. Thank
I was
you.
hoping you could talk a little bit more about how you see things going on in Congress, especially now that the Republicans have control of both chambers and we still have a Democrat in the White House, and how you see the next 2 years evolving.
Well, I don't know yet. I think Obama has made a good move to invite the leaders of Congress down to visit tomorrow. That's good. I hope it's not just the leaders. I mean, I think that conversation is very stale, the current elected leaders of Congress. There are no moving parts. Nobody does anything. I mean, with the possible exception, perhaps, of Mitch McConnell, who gave a gracious speech last night. I heard it. Good for him. But I think Obama's move ought to be to reach for more of Congress, not all of Congress, but be strategic about it. There are opinion leaders in both parties, sort of in the middle to lower ranks. I also think he should make a huge effort to get to know the newbies who haven't yet been tainted by the place. Maybe there's some possibility for oxygen there. I mean, he has to invest. Obama, he can't just have a dinner, check the box. He's got to invest in getting to know these people. Woodrow Wilson never served in Congress. I think I mentioned he's our only PhD president. He wrote his PhD thesis on Congress, and when he was president, he spent hours and hours up there meeting people. And all of you have seen the movie Lincoln. You get what happened to get the 13th Amendment passed, and you've seen, I hope, this fabulous play on Lyndon Johnson and read the Carroll books. You don't get, what you put in is what you get out. And I think Obama's commitment to getting to know and work with Congress has been inadequate. And he ought to challenge the leadership on both sides, to do stuff and step up and sit there, up there, and really engage with them and build the relationships.
Does split party governance offer more or less chance for actually passing legislation?
It depends who's in the parties. I think this is unknown. I mean, if the Republicans, this has been in the news, you all know this, want to elect a president in 2016, they've got to have some kind of a record. So they're going to want to try to do something. The Tea Party agenda is not going to be the agenda that's enacted by Congress. First of all, it might pass, but then Obama will veto it, and they don't have a veto-proof majority to pass anything over his veto. And I doubt that any president, that any president will be elected, any candidate will be elected president on the Tea Party agenda. Again, I think there are some aspects of the Tea Party agenda that are okay. It certainly should be considered. I'm not ruling any group out, but doing deals means no group will be fully satisfied. And you sit there and you figure out what's the right way forward on immigration, what's the right way forward on trade promotion authority so that we can enact these major trade regimes with Europe and Asia, which are huge foreign policy tools. I was always a pro-trade Democrat, got me in some trouble, but I believe in trade. I think it helps actual working people. It depends what the trade regime is, but there's that. There's authorization for war. There are amendments to the health care law that are responsible. There's tax reform.
Environment, energy. There's a lot of stuff.
Climate change. Read Tom Friedman this morning. Brilliant article in the New York Times about what the big challenges are. Climate change is way up there. And there are tools that could be used that would actually get Republican support, like a carbon tax. I know it's a tax. Oh my God, it's a tax. But Ernie Moniz, whom some of you may know, who's the Secretary of Energy, a brilliant guy from MIT, says that for a $10 tax, you get a 35% reduction in carbon emissions, and the $10 could be spent on tax relief. Imagine that for, pick a group in order to get support for the initiative. So, I mean, there are ways forward that would, and business leaders want certainty. So yes, it's a tax, but it actually might be a good mechanism to change behavior to save our planet. Just thought that might be relevant.
Yes.
Hi, Congresswoman. My name is Josh Stiefel. I'm a second-year public policy student at the Kennedy School. You mentioned briefly the divide between policy and politics. In D.C., I think there's only one former congressman in the Department of Defense, Secretary McHugh. Can you talk about how you see ways for bridging that divide between policy wonks and politicos? Is it necessary to create channels for policy folks to get into politics? Is it necessary for get politics folks into policy positions? And how do you see reconciliation?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I always thought I was in Congress to help enact good policy. And on the walls of my office at the Wilson Center are 8 laws where I played a major role in designing, drafting, and getting them enacted, including intelligence reform, the big 2004 law. And I always thought that good policy is good politics. If you can execute, if you can explain a complicated subject of relevance to your constituents and show them that you know how to move it forward, that works. That's kind of fallen off because the paradigm in Congress now is that you're better off not working with anybody, but blaming the other side for not solving the problem. Both sides do it. If you can say it's their fault, of course it's not my fault. They're the ones stalling the agenda. Then you cut the 30-second spot, making them look bad. And I think that is a tragedy. So I guess I don't think there's a clear answer for that. I think some people in Congress are good at policy and serious about it. You mentioned John McHugh. He's a Republican from Upper New York State. We served together on the House Armed Services Committee 1,000 years ago. He's a smart, good guy. I don't remember how he got appointed. I think it was in the Bush administration and they kept him, but I don't know if that's true. But he's still there. And he's one of the rare stories about a guy who's serious about policy actually in Congress getting an administration job. That's true. So I think I don't think there's automatically a divide. I think if you're interested in politics and you're a smart policy guy, you may have a leg up. If enough of you all run for politics, and you're going to. I mean, it's out of fashion right now, but it could be in fashion again.
Hi, my name is Bengsu. I'm an LLM student, and I have 2 questions. First one is, I read one of your articles in Los Angeles Times about the genocide fight between Turkey and Armenia.
Oh, yes.
And I want to ask, do you still have the same opinion about this? And the second question is, you talked about the problems in Middle Eastern area, and do you think the Turkey being the negotiator will be a solution?
Okay, well, I got in a lot of trouble about the Armenian genocide resolution in Congress. It is something that has passed Congress twice, and before I served there. And I actually think there was an Armenian genocide, so that wasn't my issue. And there is a huge number of Armenians who live in Southern California. In the early part of this century, was very impressed by the role that Turkey was playing. Turkey's playing less of a role now, my view, in trying to help broker some sensible solutions in the Middle East. And I stopped in Turkey on my way back to Washington and met with Prime Minister Erdogan and had a private conversation with him where he brought up this resolution and said, we in Turkey don't understand why Congress, for the 3rd time, has to pass a resolution condemning Armenian genocide. We're trying to play a positive role in the Middle East. You can dispute this or not, but and we are insulted by this effort to do it again. I was a co-sponsor of the resolution. I didn't take my name off the resolution, but when I came back, I wrote a letter to the then chairman of the, chairman, I think, of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Lantos from California, and said, you know, maybe we should delay bringing this up again. That's what I did. The end. For that, I was picketed mercilessly for a couple of years by the Armenian community, and the chant was, hypocrite, liar, Holocaust denier. And so, I mean, politics is politics. I'm telling you what happened. That was a little painful for my late father to hear, who was a refugee from Nazi Germany, but hey, you know, it's a free country. At any rate, what do I think now? I think there was a genocide. I don't have a different view of that. I think Turkey's role has become less constructive for a variety of reasons. Would I have the same advice now? I don't know. I would have to study it. But I think there are more, right now, more important issues in the Middle East. You asked me about that, that deserve urgent attention. And I'm very disappointed that the leaders in Israel and Palestine aren't taking more aggressive steps to agree on a two-state solution. I think that is an enormous lost opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Gonski. I'm a 3L here. We've talked a lot today about dysfunction in Congress, and you know, it's become sort of trendy for people to write op-ed articles and things proposing, you know, whether it's one-subject bills or campaign finance reform or gerrymandering, redistricting stuff. A lot of those are outsider opinions, and I'm just curious, from you being inside the walls for that long, what's the sort of top 2 or 3 things that you and colleagues from Congress kind of float around from inside the organization as, if these, you know, things were true, then maybe things would be a little bit better around here?
Well, that's a very thoughtful question. A lot of what Congress does and a lot of what's voted on are basically press releases. You know, efforts designed to make the other side look bad. It's tragic. I mean, you know, it's a broken business model. What do the serious people think about and talk about? I think the serious people, and there are serious people in both political parties, and jerks in both political parties. What do they think about and talk about? They think about making the place work again. I mean, people have killed themselves to get there. It's not a walk in the park to get elected to Congress, especially the way I did it. You know, moving back to where I grew up, I'd never run for anything except junior high school treasurer, which I lost. It was hard. And when you have families, 4 kids, an inconvenienced husband, it's huge. And you're commuting across the country. So you'd like to work someplace where you have some work satisfaction. So that's, I think, the biggest conversation is, how are we going to make this place work? I give the women higher marks than the men for trying to make that happen. One of my very closest friends in Congress is not in my party, and she got reelected last night, and her name is Susan Collins. I think she's extraordinarily gifted.
Senator from Maine.
Senator from Maine. And she has been a ringleader in the Senate, pulling the women together, and some men, to be problem solvers. So that's, I think, number one. On issues, it depends where you're from. But I think most people would think that the institution should be capable of immigration reform. It's a big deal. It really is fundamental to what kind of country we are. And tax reform, and you know, maybe these are just my faves, but I also think, and responsible amendments to a health care law, which was passed to get enough votes, but which has some mistakes in it that should be corrected. Those would be 3 that I think most people there think should be addressed. Is the institution capable of doing that right now? Not so much.
Hi, Emily Hogan. I'm a 2L from Manhattan Beach.
Did you vote for me?
I did, of course.
You're my favorite person here.
I was going for. We, as 1Ls now at HLS, have to take a course called Legislation and Regulation, where we spend a lot of time learning how judges sort of construct how they think Congress passes laws.
What they
canons of-
mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I'm wondering, as an actual former member of Congress, if you were ever writing a bill, if you were thinking about judicial review of what you were writing, or if some of those things seem sort of abstract once you learn them in law
Well,
school.
actually, I have a great story. So I'm this baby legislative assistant working for Senator John Tunney in the 70s. And this was back in the day, right after the Clean Air and the Clean Water Acts had passed, our cornerstone environmental laws. Remember, Richard Nixon was president. His presidency was flawed and he was totally paranoid, but actually environmental law advanced more under him than anybody else, I think. I think that's fair. So my first little job for Tunney was as his environmental LA, about which I knew almost nothing. And the next area of environmental law was noise pollution, serious issue, can cause enormous, hearing damage, et cetera. So long story how I negotiated the opportunity for him to manage the basic noise pollution law, but I did. And in order to get it through our committee, I had to make some compromises with some industry groups. One was the Air Transport Association, which represents the airline industry. And the deals that I made, I was the staffer doing this, upset the committee staff working for the chairman of the committee, who was then Ed Muskie. And I know those deals were essential to getting the law in a position where it could get reported from committee and considered on the floor. So I dug in and said, we have to make these changes. The committee staff said, if you do that, we will refuse to work on the report on the bill. So I said, okay. And there I was, age 27 or whatever, pulling an all-nighter, writing a committee report by myself in Tunney's office. I mean, this is not how you write a committee report. And it got to the part about preemption. And the issue was, did we preempt state laws? And I knew I had to fudge on that thing. So I said, the committee does not intend to address preemption. That was what I came up with by myself. The law gets on the floor of the Senate, and it passes. I mean, the bill, it passes. The last law to pass Congress in 1972 or 3 or something was the Noise Pollution Control Act. And a guy named Mike Mansfield, who was then the Senate Majority Leader, called it a legislative miracle. And Tunney will tell you to this day that it was the high point of his legislative career. So it then comes the litigation about what did this law preempt state law. I mean, this is a great legal question, and shows you, maybe I should, whatever. Goes to the Supreme Court, and Warren Christopher is arguing the case for the airline industry. And they want there to be preemption because they don't want state laws, a confused number of state laws to make their life harder. So Chris is arguing in the Supreme Court something about the bill's author or the committee report must have meant that there was preemption. He took my non-comment and skewed it, and he won. So, hey, this is I think that's exactly what you're asking me. Was I thinking about the Supreme Court? No, I was thinking about how was I going to get through the night and not be laughed out of the room. But it was amazing. It was truly amazing. Just one P.S. Steve Breyer, as you all know, worked for Ted Kennedy in the Senate, and he's asked this question often. And because he had legislative experience, he's very sensitive to this in a way that numbers of members of the Supreme Court are not.
We are so grateful to you for being here today and indeed teaching the course and being our Klinsky lecturer. Thank you so much.